American Social Realism.
The dictionary definition of social realism is an art movement that refers to the work of painters, printmakers, photographers, and filmmakers who draw attention to the everyday conditions of the working class and the poor, and who are critical of social structures that maintain these conditions. Most social realism is either a criticism of the social world or just documentation, although some also stems from a sense of pride in the United States and their nationality.
The movement of social realism started in Europe and slowly moved to the Americas. A majority of works of art from this time have European influences. There is also a bit of Mexican influence in the later years. Many artists during this time were inspired by the way they were affected by the Great Depression and World War I, but there was an obsession with the conditions of the lower class that stemmed from movements of the 18th and 19th century.
Wood grew up surrounded by farmland and farm animals, which is why he painted a lot of countryside scenes. All the good ideas I ever had came to me while I was milking a cow.
In 1898, President Theodore Roosevelt declared, "I feel we cannot too strongly visit upon the need for rough, manly virtues in the education of boys." Grant Wood came from a family of abolitionist Quakers in Iowa. His father was stern and insisted that his sons grew to follow in his footsteps as strong young men.
His past experiences, even from a young age, caused inspiration to his pieces that caused psychological relief for his strong emotions. His father passed away in 1901 from apparent heart failure, and that childhood experience shaped his paintings like no other. Wood's failure to fulfill his period's and father's expectations may be traced in his first attempts at drawing.
He would hide underneath the kitchen table with his mother's protection, and it would become his private studio. I had privacy and could peer out at the world through the arched openings of the red checkered tablecloth. Wood grew up to be a very shy child, and his teachers would even let him draw in their offices during grade school. I was as bashful as a child has ever lived. I couldn't speak a piece at the Sunday school entertainment or sing a song at the school assembly, but I would pour out all of my emotions and longings in a painting. Give a child a piece of paper and he will not ask questions. He will make drawings. This doesn't mean that he's queer. Expression, contrary to the popular notion, isn't a controlled activity involving the selection and organization of materials of past experience and their fusion with present situations to create new forms.
In 1917, Wood joined the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and painted camouflage on tanks and cannons. Between 1920 and 1926, he traveled to Paris and then later Germany and was inspired by French Impressionists. After his trip to Germany, he found a way to paint on his own. He painted what he knew and loved while incorporating ideas he took with him from Europe. He realized that scenes from his childhood and of the places he knew were just as beautiful as the places he had seen in Europe. He preferred having fun with what he painted, which is why he loved painting the people he knew and loved. Many critics believe this is why he was so successful. He had a certain love and connection with all of his work.
His paintings became popular because they portrayed working-class families during the Great Depression, and they were seen as easier to understand. His stance on America was positive and somewhat satirical, which was a ray of sunshine during the Great Depression.
This painting, along with many of his other landscapes, show more of a cartoon style than many of his previous paintings. He used bright and vibrant colors to show a positive outlook on life in rural America during that time. He also shows a great exaggeration with the many hills that are supposed to represent the American plains. Wood painted this after he was inspired by European architecture. He found a random barn he liked because of the middle-aged style in the window. After sketching the barn, Wood drew his sister and his dentist as the farm couple. American Gothic won third prize at a contest at the Art Institute of Chicago, which attributed to a lot of his fame. Even though the expressions on their faces seem sad, the background shows lighter colors, making it look like a happier place to live.
This is Wood's mother. Similar to other portraits, she's portrayed as a strong, independent frontier woman.
Thomas Hart Benton grew up in a family of politicians, which is why he was so outspoken and concerned with American society and its issues.
Benton enrolled in the Art Institute of Chicago but soon dropped out to move to France. In France, he enrolled in the Académie Julian but again dropped out. He became an admired teacher at New York's Art Students League despite his negative history with schooling.
Although he went to France to study art, he was not as strongly influenced by it as others were. Modern French painting is all right. It has produced many beautiful and interesting things fully worthy of admiration, but it has also set up response habits among our artistic authorities, which have worked against a free approach to other artistic forms.
I have a sort of inner conviction that for all the possible limitations of my mind and the disturbing effects of my processes, for all the contradicting struggles and failures I have gone through, I have come to something that is in the image of America and the American people of my time.
Benton was very outspoken and portrayed that in his work. He put his opinion into his paintings, using some of them to protest against the KKK, lynching, and fascism. His outspokenness caused him to become isolated in his field because he was so strong-minded. He painted murals for Indiana and Missouri, which portrayed the working class and everyday individuals. The most famous of these is called America Today.
This half of the America Today mural portrays the great nightlife that the rich people of New York were able to be a part of. It also shows their other activities like going to boxing matches, seeing circus shows, riding the subway, and going out to dinner. The bottom part shows hands reaching for food and money during the time of the Great Depression. This half depicts the struggles of the mistreated working class, which mostly consisted of immigrants looking for the American dream and those under racial inequality. It also acts as a warning for the future with smokestacks and heavy pollution. This painting focuses more on his negative side. He emphasizes it by using dark colors. The best way to also show this side is to show a negative scene. In this case, he paints mistreated mine workers.
George Bellows was raised in Ohio and went to Ohio State University to play baseball. He was also a caricaturist and an illustrator for the OSU yearbook. The Cincinnati Reds wanted to draft him in 1904, like his father wanted, but to prove his father that he was serious about art, he missed his final exams for his junior year. His father agreed to fund him in New York until he made a steady living. As a child, Bellows was teased frequently and he quickly learned to defend himself. The coincidence is that later he became interested in boxing matches, which were illegal at the time. They could be found all over the city. It also captures the psychological reality of how it feels to see something like that right in front of you.
A work of art can be any imaginable thing, and this is the beginning of modern painting. Part of this is finding things and documenting them. A lot of things are not going to be here 5 to 10 years from now.
While in New York, Bellows studied with Robert Henry, who encouraged his students to paint urban life at its grittiest. Bellows used quick brushstrokes, which gave the paintings a sense of urgency to be finished, similar to the rushing chaos of daily life in New York. These vivid, heavy brushstrokes were similar to those of Robert Henry, whom influenced Bellows' work greatly. Henry and Bellows became very close throughout their lives. Henry was deeply affected by Bellows' death, saying, "I always gave him my most severe criticism, because I thought he was my best pupil. Now I am sure of it."
Other than the vivid, quick brushstrokes he adopted from Robert Henry, he was also influenced by many other signs about New York as well. He used intense light when doing portraits and used electrical lighting colors that were almost fake looking, like the neon light signs that were all over New York. He also took aspects of film and comics and photography and put them into his paintings. Since he was studying in New York, he had a more urban realist style than other American social realists of his time.
In the boxing match paintings, Bellows was trying to paint two men trying to kill each other, but yet his strokes make them look so graceful. The boxing paintings are both brutal and beautiful. They reveal something in nature that people respond to, but they do not shy away from different realities. Bellows wanted people to be engaged, shocked, and bored. He didn't want them to be exactly connected to what he was trying to portray.
During this fight, the roles had flipped between the two people in the ring. The man being thrown out of the ring ended up being the victor. This painting is different because it takes place at a polo club and not in a smoky/shady backroom in the city. The two men in the ring are also different compared to other boxers he has painted because of their obvious class. The man that ended up winning the match represents purity and goodness due to the color of his shorts. After he started a family of his own, his focus turned more to landscapes and portraits. He enjoyed painting portraits of women, mostly his wife and two daughters. His work went from being very harsh to soft and delicate, proving his talent in more than one type of subject. The one thing that remained constant was his limited color palette, which he adopted from Denman W. Ross. From 1911 and on, he painted rocky coasts, landscapes, ramshackle farms, etc. in Maine and Woodstock, New York. Even later in his career, after studying the works of J. Hambridge and his theory of dynamic symmetry, his work changed again to become very geometric and smooth. With the shift of his subjects from manly and tough to feminine and soft, the way he painted changed as well. You can see how his paintings shifted from brighter colors to a more pastel palette. Overall, the painting is still dark, but the brushstrokes are more smooth and delicate compared to the roughness of the boxing paintings.
Dorothy was born on May 26, 1985 in Hoboken, New Jersey. After high school, Dorothy went to Columbia University to study photography. She was an apprentice to portrait artist Arnold Genth and eventually opened a very successful studio in California.
Dorothy attended Columbia University to learn studio photography, but soon became bored and moved on to the world of photojournalism. Her work started off being purely for documentation purposes, but later on in her career it was considered art by many critics. Dorothy was strongly influenced by Arnold Genthe when attending training school in New York.
Lang introduced the idea that journalism and art could be interchangeable. Art didn't have to be something out of the ordinary. Everyday life is art in itself. Lang used her opinion a lot in her photos, despite critics saying her style was detached. She tried to change what the viewer thought with her photos. Bring the viewer to your side, include him in your thought. He is not a bystander. You have the power to increase his perceptions and conceptions.
Although a lot of critics called Dorothy's work detached since it was technically journalism, you can see, in this piece as well as others, the emotion behind the scene, the worrisome look on the mother's face as her children hang on her shoulders. This portrays life and what it was like for a lot of mothers during the Great Depression. They never knew if they would have enough money to buy their children dinner or help them in case they got sick. While other social realists tried to show the positives of life during this time, Dorothy chose to show the negatives and not try to sugarcoat the extremely bad times. Dorothy again decided not to sugarcoat the realities of this time. This photo of Japanese American children looks happy as they salute the American flag, but in reality, they are being held as prisoners in concentration camps. This was taken during World War II when the American government was very suspicious of Japanese Americans because of the attack on Pearl Harbor. They were treated harshly and cruelly, but the government tried to cover up that. Dorothy tried to portray this in this photo.
Although Edward Hopper painted things similar to George Bellows, he was not considered to be a social realist, only a realist and a modernist.
Edward Hopper was a part of the Ashcan School, a school for young men to portray modern urban life in the city for how it truly was. They showed the more negative aspects of the city, such as the unsanitary streets and the prostitutes. Robert Henry is part of this school, and he influenced Hopper as well as many other artists who attended this school.
In general, it can be said that a nation's art is greatest when it most reflects the characters of its people. Hopper was very concerned with documenting life in the city as he saw it, and not trying to romanticize or make it seem worse than it was. It was very important to him to paint exactly what he saw. Edward Hopper painted many scenes of nightlife in New York City, yet wasn't considered a social realist because of the style he painted in. Georgia O'Keeffe painted many night scenes and skylines of New York City, but was not considered a social realist because although her paintings depicted New York City, they did not depict the lifestyles of people living there. Nothing is less real than realism. Details are confusing. It is only by selection, by elimination, by emphasis, that we get at the real meaning of things. I have but one desire as a painter, that is to paint what I see, as I see it, in my own way, without regard for the desire or taste of the professional collector. I attribute what little success I have to this fact. I wouldn't turn our stuff for order, and I couldn't. It would stifle any creative ability I possess.
Social realism was slowly pushed out of the spotlight by the emergence of abstractionism and modernism, but its influence has stayed strongly on film even to this day.